Welcome back to another episode of Keoni Chats. So my guest today is former University of Oregon School of Journalism and Communications alumni, Gus McTigue. So Gus and I never had a small class together. We had one of those introductory big classes where the teacher just goes over the basic logistics of journalism or whatever class course you're taking. So I never really, at least to my memory, we never really had like a small class where we did a lot of interactions together. But anytime I did talk with him, and anytime, because for journalism, for example, you aren't really tests. There aren't really tests. They're more project based, which is how I was able to excel so much. So anytime I saw Gus's work, oh man, it was always just, I was always asking myself, just how did he do that? Oh, I like that angle. How did he get that? Or either that or, oh, I like the response he got in whatever interview he did for that project. And I was just like, how can I garnish some responses like that at that stage of my life? I was just like, how can I get to that point? I was always wondering that. So I was very happy to reach out to Gus and check in with him, and then also get him on the show for this week's episode. So very happy to just reconnect with him also, because you do the research. Obviously, you got to do your research, and finding out what he's been up to since college. It just shows that he's really taken that degree, which for the longest time was on just kind of collecting dust for me. So he took that degree and he really ran hard with it. So it's, again, more excited. I have a mixed bag of like excited emotions for him, because he's following the dream, and he is putting that degree to use. Some part of me is also like, why couldn't I have done that sooner? Like, why couldn't I have applied myself like how he did? But also, anytime I come across those kinds of questions of like, why couldn't I do that? I kind of knock myself a little bit, but then I pick myself up and use it as motivation to, continue and, try to push myself to do it. So, it was a great interview. So Gus is, he was, I could tell in the beginning of the interview, he was a little stiff, it felt a little off for him to be in front of the camera instead of behind the camera. So, he did a fantastic job. I think it was a great conversation. Kind of pivoting to another talking point where the condition of the world is getting a little better than what it was in 2020. So basically meaning like life can kind of pick up to some degree. Life can pick up to what it was like in 2019. Obviously, you're still wearing masks. You're still doing social distancing. And, I'm going to plays. I'm going to concerts. I'm going to games. All you got to do is just show proof of vaccination or a negative COVID test. So it's all great. And I just remember I was at the movie theater and hearing that, Maria Menounos, she's fantastic. It's great. I also loved her when she was doing her WWE stint, but she said that she was starting a podcast also. So I'm noticing also like all these other people are starting podcasts, all these other celebrities, all the other TV personalities, and all these other just high profile folks are starting podcasts, which is, nevertheless, it's always going to be fun to just see other people's point of views. But it does tend to make me feel a little too saturated, a little too in the just too much of what everyone else is doing. So, I'm never going to say that me as a podcast host is anything special in comparison to someone else as a podcast host, because we're all different. But I really think that if you are listening or watching the show and you're enjoying it, I really hope you're just enjoying hearing someone else's story and finding some relationship points to that. Whether it is for Gus, for example, it's actually not using Gus as an example because you're about to listen to this episode, but just using let's say, let's use Albert Jew, or Flannel Albert, my guest last week or previously. If you're just like, hey, Albert experienced this hard moment with his folks, I can relate to that because I've experienced that too. This is interesting. Hopefully that's, honest to God, that is my absolute goal. My absolute goal with this podcast show. It's never to try and join a giant crowd of other podcast shows. It's just fun for me, and it's I have a great feeling of just gratification knowing that I help someone's story get out into the world. So I welcome you. If you are listening or watching for the first time, welcome. You can follow all episode releases by following the show on social media. That would be at KC Media 13 on both Instagram and Twitter, and Conlu K Media on Facebook. So if you are watching this, obviously you know that you can find the show on YouTube when you go to youtube.com and search Keoni Chats. I put it in the title of all my episodes, so that way it'll be easier to find. Subscribe, follow, just stay with the show. And as you're watching the show, watching this episode at least, you'll see on your lower right hand a little tag for my website, keoniconlu.com, keoniconlu.com. No one else is going to market this other than me, so might as well have it there looking right at you for about an hour and some change. So check out the website. I do have other creative avenues in terms of a blog series, a couple of blog series. One that is the NFL drafts, because right now it's the NFL season. Week 4 is about the time of this release and recording of this intro. So once this past off season, I did do I think just one or two mock drafts. I think it was actually just one, and I also do a DC Animated Universe review series. So check that out. 2021. I believe there's one film left for me to view. It hasn't been released yet, so it's kind of on the back burner for now. But check it out. If you agree with my thoughts on some movies, obviously what's great about journalism is such an opinion piece. It can be. But check out my review series on DC animated movies, all the way from late 90s to 2020, because 2021 is obviously still getting worked on. But check it out. Let me know what you think. I'd love to interact with you. And just any way I can really push myself. I also take photos. Just check out the website. I got a whole bunch of other stuff for you to check out, for you to enjoy. I hope you enjoy, at least. So however you are listening to this episode, whichever platform you prefer, or if you are watching on YouTube, I hope you enjoy my episode, my chat with Gus McTigue. I'm feeling a little tight. I got a little tight back right now. But I'm loosened up. I'm ready to roll. I know this is gonna be your first time in front of the camera after a long time. Again, do we need to do some shoulder warm-ups, some loosen up the jaw a little bit, make sure we can enunciate? Oh yeah, we're old people, Gus. We're old people. Oh, I couldn't hear the crack, but your expression after the crack was just found it. We found it.
Nice little triple in the back of the neck there. I needed that. I've been in the car for 2 hours, so it was definitely get a little stiff.
Yeah, you do a lot of traveling for work. I mean, early on you did some traveling, and you still do some traveling now. Do you ever just how much time would you say you spend on the road for work?
Oh man, I mean, it depends on the project, right? Right now, and especially the pandemic's throwing a whole wrench into maybe the normal workflow, but I'd say at least one road trip a week is pretty regular. Um, I think, if I was to think about it, I've probably done at least 10 hours in the car each week the past month or two. And then, pre-pandemic, I'd probably get out minimum 10 a week,
Mm-hmm.
probably.
Some work, some fun.
Yeah, a little bit of both. I'd say more on the work side. When I'm doing it for fun, I try to keep like within maybe like a 2 hour radius of, whatever city I'm in.
Mm-hmm. And so how do you keep yourself entertained? Because obviously 2 hours, I'm in Portland, we went to school in Eugene. 2 hours is about that Portland to Eugene time span. To do that numerous times, I don't even know how to keep A, awake, or B, entertained that whole time.
Mm-hmm.
How'd you do it?
Oh, no, I'm a podcast guy for sure. Try to keep up with New York Times, the Daily, and I pretty much revolve through a bunch of different stuff. I've got an Audible subscription, so a lot of books on tape kind of thing.
Yeah, I was talking with someone that was a high school graduate with my brother, and then she also does photography. With her name's Katie, and she said that she recommended all these books. In my head, I was just like, I don't know how am I gonna like. I'm thinking sit down and actually read the book physically. But she's like, no, there's books on tape. I'm like, holy God, that is an option.
It's really nice. I feel like it. I don't like being unproductive when I'm in the car. That always kind of bothers me a bit about the longer road trips. And so if I've got a book going, it always feels like, okay, I'm getting something done. I'm still making some progress, even though I've got to be seated here
Yeah,
for length of time.
yeah. What are you listening to now? I guess would be the better way to say it.
Oh, I just finished up a book, so I'm on the hunt for something new.
Mm.
What was it? I've got one that I've been thumbing through, the Freelance Manifesto. It's I can't remember the author, but this company that he works for, School of Motion, does a lot of really great motion graphics and animation courses, and they're just I've always enjoyed their classes, so I was like, I'll pick up the book. I'll see what I can learn.
Yeah. And so you are now currently a freelancer with your name. So Gus McTigue, is that am I saying that right?
Gus McTigue, yes.
McTigue. Gus McTigue visuals. I mean, there's a journey that I want to cover with you leading up to that, but just the whole like idea of a freelancer.
Mhm.
How'd you feel about that? Because that could be very tricky.
Yeah, well, and I think I actually tripped you up a little. I'm on staff now with Washington State University, so
Yeah.
I'm not doing as much of the freelancing these days, but definitely for the past 4 years before this, was doing it mostly down Portland.
Mm-hmm.
But so, returning to your question, can you repeat where you're going with that?
Just the idea of a freelancer. It's just I remember when I got out of college, I was just like, I'm gonna be a freelance reporter. I'm gonna just do this, thinking like with all this work I did at Eugene,
Mhm.
for some odd reason, someone at the Oregon Live was gonna like notice me and then it's gonna come hire me for my services. But it's like, no, that's a tough lifestyle. How'd you I mean, you're doing it some on the side, but when you're doing it more as more of your free time assumption, how was just the idea of being a freelancer?
Yeah, I mean, whenever I talk to, maybe younger students about, going into freelance after school, I really try, I don't want to scare them, but it's a tough racket, especially right out of school to dive into. I didn't necessarily do it because I said to myself, yes, freelance is going to be the best route to progress, and more out of necessity, I guess. I studied journalism. I was looking for jobs in media production out of school, and unfortunately, especially for video production, it's pretty few and far between, either paid internships or entry level positions in video production. They just don't have enough of them to meet the supply of folks that are going into the industry. So I came in as a production assistant, working on commercial and a little. I didn't do any like narrative production, just mostly commercial production and then like corporate type shoots.
Mhm.
And I kind of did what maybe the classic like beginning of video production career I feel like is it's like you do a little bit of PA on set, you do a little bit of shooting, corporate stuff, maybe weddings. I didn't do any weddings personally, but I feel like that's where I see a lot of folks kind of get into it. But as for freelancing, the beginning was really hard. It's all about networking, all about trying to find folks that need your skill set but also are willing to let you learn a bit what you're doing when you're that young in your career. And some of it was really good, and some I definitely had some projects that flamed out and were emotionally tough and financially stressful. I think that's the hardest part of freelancing, is just being able to have the like entrepreneurial spirit, to be able to just have your finances in check, know how to be essentially a salesman, be able to sell the work that you do and be able to get new clients. And then balance all that with trying to still be creative and still be an artist, right? And so it was, I guess I had mixed feelings about it. I'd say being on staff has been really nice because I've been able to take a step back from the stress that I was definitely holding. Especially like 2019 was a really hard year for me in production. Just working really long hours, kind of feeling like I was a bit scattered on the types of projects I was doing and maybe not pursuing the ones that were in line with what I'd hoped for. I went in thinking that I was going to be doing mostly documentary production, and that was really going to be my focus. And shifting to the commercial and the corporate side was really the only way I could sustain myself, in the beginning of my career. So kind of coming back to that has been a little stressful, a little tough, but ultimately I think it's where I want to go.
Yeah, and then 2019 pre-pandemic, were you thinking that like, oh, some of these projects, your when you think back to your 2019 projects, do you ever think like this could lead into maybe another thing, another thing, another thing? Obviously, like during 2020, I was thinking, for me at least, I was like, oh, cool, it's 2020. It sounds cool. Cool things are gonna happen. I'm gonna get back to like my journalism degree. I'm gonna do this. Obviously, like I just kicked off officially doing this hobby and having it applied to my degree. Were there any projects you worked on in 2019 where you're just like very hopeful it's gonna follow through with another project, but just obviously kind of flamed out?
Hmm. That's a good question. And it's tough to keep straight when some of the things I was working on
Mm-hmm.
were, because it's just like, gosh, I probably was averaging like 50 different productions a year, you know, right around then. And so I'm trying to think, probably the documentary Who's on Top, I think that was wrapping up there in 2019. And that was the most in line with the work that I wanted to do. And it felt like an important story to be told. And it was a lot of fun. I had a really great time. I was like, if I could just be doing this for every single project, moving forward, I would be just so happy. And I don't feel like I'm the type that I need to. Uh, how do I put it? I don't need a lot, I guess, to be able to feel financially secure. I'm not like I don't need to be living some big lifestyle and be able to do what I love. So documentary would seem fine to me, but it's yeah. I mean, it's just a balancing act, right? You gotta still be able to pay the bills at the end of the day. And video production, especially, is a financial investment. If you're
Yeah.
gonna be an owner operator.
Yeah, because I have a friend who runs his own creative agency, and just seeing some of the things he does, be like behind the scenes shots, obviously, but I haven't been there in person. I've told him I want to, because some of the cameras I see him use are just, yeah, this can be a very expensive hobby, whether it's just videography, photography, podcasting. It's I'm happy that I have a job that I can actually like supply that desire to keep telling stories, but it's also like, whew, man, it's yeah, it's taxing mentally and emotionally.
Yeah.
So for the Who's on Top, how did that story come about? Because I'm glad you brought that up.
Yeah, yeah, totally. It's I met the director, Devin Tao, at an OMPA event, the Oregon Media Production Association, and they host these networking events for people in the industry in Portland. And I was at the time I was subletting an office that was right next to the OMPA, and so I kind of got to be close with them, and I was doing my editing over there in that office, and so I pop into their events pretty regularly. And I wasn't necessarily working, the OMPA is a little more narrative specific, television and film industry. Um, but I still enjoyed meeting other folks that, worked behind the camera. And so that it was always enjoyable to go over and met the director of Who's on Top, Devin, at one of their networking events. And he and I had a great conversation, and he was in need of a camera operator for pretty extended, I think it took us about a year of shooting to get through that. And I had, some availability, and I was more than happy to jump on. And also, the demands of the project where they had to be able to keep up with the mountain climbers, right? And that was something that I was really excited to do and dive into. It was a lot of fun.
So Who's on Top? That's about about 4 members from the LGBTQ community climbing Mount Hood, and that is nice. That it's Portland based. It's not like it's because there's so many documentaries about like high climbs in LA or high climbs in New York or like that, but to have that be centered around such a famous mountain here in Oregon, and have George Takei narrate it. What? Did you get to meet him?
I did not get to meet him, but I was pretty impressed. Devin is a hustler, like through and through. He really is a master of being able to find the resources to be able to pull a film together, because it's so, especially when you're directing documentary or indie film production, there's just so many different facets to it that you can't necessarily just be a master of directing on set. You have to also be an amazing producer. You got to be an amazing salesman. I've kind of said it before in other ways about freelancing, and those skills definitely transfer over. But yeah, I don't know how he managed that. I don't know how he got the meeting, but he brings such a great drama to the film. When you hear his voice, it's just so iconic, and,
Yeah.
and being able to have that it was pretty cool. I was pretty amazed.
So you were part of the whole hike, or I assume you have to be part of the whole hike. What was I mean, other than the weather, what was the most difficult part about it?
Well, so to frame things up, part of this is going through the personal stories of each of these folks, and illustrating how different parts of the LGBTQ community have wildly different experiences, personally, and whether it be coming out, or surgical experience, or things like that. That was more than half of the story, and the climbing and the whole experience of being able to learn mountain climbing for 3 of these folks was kind of more just the backdrop, I guess you could say, to hear about their lives. And so the hardest part was that I wasn't a mountain climber before that, and neither were 3 of these folks. Our lead climber, she was the one teaching and bringing people through that experience. She was the only one of those 4 that had any prior mountain climbing experience. So we had to, ground zero learn. And I had to learn while filming. So I was like going on these, avalanche safety classes, and I'd have to run ahead of the group and, get a shot. And then I'd have to also be listening, because I was like, oh, I've got to retain this information as well for when I'm up there. But we had guides on the climb on Mount Hood as well. So I could focus on, the camera work and on being able to make sure I was getting the shots I needed, and know that somebody was watching my back, and, being able to make sure the safety side was being held to account. But it was hard. I mean, it's just difficult to film on top of a mountain, whether it be exposure is so hard in the snow, keeping your gear light and waterproofed and accessible, because it's so much of it is me having to run ahead to spots or to places or drop into the location where I can get the angle I need and then quickly get the shot and get back to climbing the mountain. And so it's a unique challenge.
Did you ever watch I know it's Man versus Wild with Bear Grylls. Oh, what's the other one where it's just the one guy? I can't remember the name because I haven't seen it in forever. But the big skepticism was just that Man versus Wild, Bear Grylls is with a crew where the crew could run ahead, and then this other show, which I'll insert the subtitles for people watching. That obviously I'm blanking on the name of the show, but yeah, it was just him out in the wild, and yeah, he mentioned about that kind of issue where he wants a shot of him climbing a mountain. He has to run a little further ahead and then go back and then to that point, basically repeat that process as much as he wants. That's just, oh man,
It's great.
that's crazy.
Yeah, I mean, it takes a little bit of Hollywood magic, I guess, to make any production work,
Mhm.
right? Um, and I don't think that should take away from, uh, you know, saying, for instance, I think Bear Grylls is like the classic example, right? Where people are like, oh, he's with the crew, like, is he really ever in danger? And maybe some of the drama that you create for TV is, maybe a bit contrived, but I still think at the end of the day, they're out in these places, experiencing these, conditions, and I, I just don't, I don't know. I don't think it should take away from it at all that you got other folks also experiencing that
Yeah.
with you,
Yeah.
and it's especially like and I don't want to speak for all camera operators, but I think we try so much to be conscious of the headspace that the folks we're working with need to be in, both for safety and then also to be able to be on screen, which is pretty difficult and somewhat uncomfortable experience for folks that aren't necessarily conditioned for that. And so we try our best to allow them to be able to experience those emotions without interrupting, without being able to having to put ourselves into the situation. So try to blend in, I guess.
Is there a shot that you remember doing when filming Who's on Top that when it came to the release, you were just like, okay, I just want to, this is the shot. I want people like when they watch it and I'm like near them, I'll be like, that was me. I feel great about this one. God, let's do this again.
Oh man, I that's so funny you asked that. I'd have to rewatch,
Hmm.
because it's totally the flip side. I am so critical when I'm watching my own stuff. I'm not looking for like the best shot. I'm looking for every mistake that or every little micro jitter of the camera and
Yeah.
every little spot. And I mean that's silly, and I shouldn't be too hard
Yeah.
on myself or too critical. But it's just the natural instinct.
Yeah, that was actually gonna be my follow-up question because, when I watch, I edit the interviews myself, so obviously I'm watching the whole thing again after experience it, and I'm just like, oh, I didn't say some acronyms correctly. Like when it comes to the, LGBTQ, so I have to say it slowly so I make sure like when I watch it over again, I'll be like, okay, all right, I'm good. I'm good. I don't have to start making apologies for saying the acronyms wrong. But I think that also helps you become better for the next time or the next time. Just
Yeah,
be that critical on yourself.
I think you're right. I try my best to make sure that I'm reviewing the work that I do, and sometimes it's kind of hard because especially when I was not, before I stepped in doing shooting and editing at WSU, I often would camera operate and then hand off my footage to an editor. And depending on what the turnaround was for the next project, I might not even ever review the stuff that I'd shot the week before. And that's tough because, then that does kind of stall some of the growth. I think the repetition and being able to be on set a lot and shooting things consistently is really good for technique, because it just builds in that muscle memory. But not being able to review stuff sometimes just because of time crunch is hard, because you don't catch those mistakes, and sometimes you do repeat them in the future. Or yeah, I think developing your eye often takes being able to edit your own footage, whether it's to be able to see how much latitude you necessarily have in exposure. um, and I guess I think back to the climb, and there's definitely a lot of stuff that I realized that I just would get rushed. And I'd let myself get rushed, and I'd pull out of framing too quickly, or I'd try to establish a shot that I definitely didn't have time to complete. And then when it's so rushed and it's so shaky, it's, not not the quality that you're looking for. But then, the flip side of that is that you got to catch the moments, even if
Yeah.
it's not perfect. You got to try to catch those emotional moments.
Yeah, because you're gonna beat yourself up. Not if it's to whatever degree you beat yourself up over missing that. It's still you're hard on yourself because you're like, oh, why was my camera on? Oh, why was the lens cap still on? Oh,
Mhm.
this like the maybe the ISO wasn't correct if it's like a photo or whatnot. So
Yeah.
um, it's definitely I would say photography, which you also do some stills. I've seen on your website. Um, Photography is one of those that's I'm trying to like work on the manual focus versus the audio focus, and I feel because I'm already using the manual because I learned that from one of our photo classes. I don't think we took photo classes together, but just the photo classes at journal at the J school in UO.
Mhm.
It's like, okay, I'm gonna use manual and I'm not gonna use any of these presets. But then when I use like the audio focus, automatic focus, I'm just like, I think I could do better. I'm gonna try manual. And then I try it and some specific moments, like sporting events or whatnot. I'm just like, oh, damn it, it's blurry.
Mhm.
Ugh.
And it's always devastating when focus is off.
Yeah. Like
It's top five ones that just hurts my heart.
it does. It does. You're like, I could be better. I'll be better, coach. Sorry, coach. Who's coach? I don't know.
I think we're our own coach, right? And that's a hard place to be.
Oh, there it is. There it is. And so for you, I have been wondering this because yeah, you do have your hands in a lot of pots. I've been around some project managers that do handle multiple projects at once and kind of seen how they proceed and make sure everything moves forward. How
Mhm.
do you keep able to turn your focus from one project to another project to another project and still make sure it all proceeds onwards and doesn't stalls?
I think that besides maybe the business side of becoming a freelancer, that's the part of my work that has grown the most, and it's been the most difficult. Because I frankly, I wasn't a very organized person in college, or right after. I really had to kind of learn by trial and error what worked for me, and I I'm a little forgetful. I don't think that I can deny that. So I've really had to build systems in place that kind of keep me in check. Um, as for project management, I try to keep it simple. I think having a document or some sort of pre-production process, no matter how small or how quick the project is, having something you can refer back to, I think is essential. Um, for me, the other half of it was I take a lot of handwritten notes. We talked about wanting to keep track of what folks are saying and what concepts I want to come back to in the future. And often the quickest way to do that is just being able to write that out during a pre-interview or during an interview even, and then being diligent about transcribing at least the bullet points of those notes onto my pre-production documents later, um, so that I don't forget. Because it is, especially right now, I'm just doing a volume of projects, and I've got to be able to, you know, finish up something at 11 and be in the headspace of that next project by, 11:15, 11:30. And so being able to have just a quick reference to go back to is so essential.
What was the pre-interview and also just that whole your steps leading into that work you did with Metal Toad and Simplexity, the commercial where I watched it and I was just like, how did you try to understand this and try like how did you try and make this comprehensible for someone else like myself that doesn't know anything about the kind of work that they do? And to this day, like, I mean, I watched it the previous day of this interview, and I'm still just like, what exactly are they doing? But the visuals did help paint a picture, and how they were talking, like their excitement about it, did help me feel at least like I'm a little more in tune with this just because of their excitement and their interest in their own projects. How'd you do that?
Oh, well, first off, I really appreciate that was a really tough project, and I was really proud of how it turned out. So Metal Toad works in cloud computing, which anything that's technology for focused or especially cloud focused work is really difficult to visually show, in an interesting way. And so finding ways to make that work was a fun challenge. But the added element to that was that we actually had to do that on a crazy time crunch because the the reason that project started out was that they were pitching to I think it was UCLA's hospital. They were essentially trying to win a bid for a project that they were going to be bidding on. I want to say I heard about this on like a Wednesday, and they bid on the project on Monday.
Oh,
Uh, yeah, and so we had just that, you know, 5 days probably to be able to pull this together. So it was a lot of really quick back and forth, and they had an amazing gal working in their advertising. I can't remember her name off the top of my head, but I'll
yeah.
come back to that. But you know, being able to have somebody in their space that was working back and forth with me, daily, we'd essentially be passing documents off,
Mm.
passing in the night, and then she'd be reviewing in the morning, while I was still on other sets. Um, and we really locked in, you know, we first had to lock in the goals that they wanted to be able to convey within the video. And so that took a lot of planning on their part of, okay, these are, the specific language we want to use. These are the folks that would be the best to tell those parts of the story. And then I had to work back from that and be able to say, okay, how are we going to fit this into our timeline? How are we going to get B-roll associated with each of these topics? Logistically, how are we going to get interviews in Vancouver and Portland, and B-roll from both locations in the time we need it for our editor to be able to turn things around? So it was just really a lot of things working in tandem.
Mhm.
And I'm kind of going on and on, but I hope I'm fleshing it out for you.
No, it's perfect because when we were in the UO UOSOJC, University of Oregon School of Journalism. I remember Rebecca Forrest. She's always like, make sure you write out the whole thing on your resume because it's a badge of honor, basically. So I always have to say with a
Well,
little bravado. But yeah, it's just remember like any project we had in there, like the storyboarding process, just like how we want this all to look. And just I remember I obviously haven't practiced it as much as you do now, but it's just like I forgot. I was just like, oh man, that does take a lot of work. And then shooting, like it can take probably twice as much time to get that done. But with something this complicated, I was just like, my God. I just, whew, Gus, I applaud you, sir.
well, I'll have to send you I've definitely got the pre-production documents on Google Drive right now, and I sometimes use them as a template for other projects. I do that all the time. Is if I have something that's in a similar vein or a similar structure,
Hmm.
I always try and look back at stuff I've already created and see if I can reuse any of that documentation just to streamline the process. But then the other half of that was really essential was I worked with a really good team on that project. I had Ty Baseflug and Key Higdon, who were both SOJC folks, and
Yeah.
they were shooting, they were helping with the story, and that really made it doable to get that much work done in such a short time. And then Jake Sullivan, I think it was cinema studies, but also all U of O crowd. He ended up
You
editing.
have a pull to pluck from, basically.
No, I think the network's completely essential for production. I think that the network often is just as important as the skill set that you bring to the table.
I'm also wondering, how were you able to get a hold of Marcus Harvey, owner of Portland Gear, and did a package on him? Because Portland Gear, for those of you that don't know, it's something Portlanders are. I've always felt kind of weird wearing Portland Gear items because it's like, what is it? A tour or a person wearing a tourist t-shirt, because when I worked at Nike, they had like the Nike Portland shirts, and I usually associate that with anyone that's visiting from out of state that needs something that's saying they were in Portland. But for someone that lives in Portland to wear something that says Portland, it's still cool, but it's also just like kind of a weird thing to think about. But so yeah, Portland Gear, it's a big clothing line company. I guess it's still growing, but it's getting fairly big. How'd you connect with him?
Man, this one's just the classic story. I was in a fraternity in college, and he was an alumni from maybe 4 years prior to me starting there. And it was just, that connection opened up the door. I actually did that project while I was interning at the U of O,
Oh, okay.
and we were on the hunt for alumni with interesting stories, and his was fascinating. He essentially built that brand from the ground up on the back of an Instagram page. He managed to get at Portland, and then through the amazing photography, he started to build that page up, and it became hugely popular. And um, I couldn't tell you off the top of my head how the store first got created, but point being, it was he was such a successful entrepreneur to come right out of school and be an amazing designer. And he had such great roots in the sports community, and he's really made a splash in the Portland sports community, specifically. And he's just a nice guy. He's
Yeah.
fun to work with, and I was super new and fresh, and he was really kind to allow me to take some time to work with them, because it was I definitely remember that interview was not my best interview. I distinctly recall fumbling through my words and not necessarily knowing, my transitions perfectly.
Yeah.
But I think the project turned out good. It looked really good. We pushed the envelope. I was working with a really amazing editor at U of O, and he taught me how to do, a hyperlapse of, essentially a moving time lapse around these key places in Portland. And, that was so fun because it was the perfect visual technique to push the story, because it was, so much of his success was centered around this amazing photography that started with the Portland Instagram page. And so being able to do a photocentric technique to push the video was really fun and just made sense.
And for those that also want to see more of like Portland Gear's work, they also helped create the new logo for the Portland Winterhawks, I believe. So
Yeah, that's
for
right.
those hockey fans, check that out. And then we'll do a little plug.
Yeah, right.
follow Portland Gear on Instagram. Come on, guys.
Yeah, well, I mean, actually, it's kind of close to my heart. I played hockey in Portland, all growing up and in high school, and I still was playing in the adult leagues up until I moved up here. So I've definitely got a lot of love for the hockey community out there, and people are pretty excited about the new Winterhawks rebranding.
Yeah, and also, how are you feeling about the Seattle Krakens? That team.
Oh man, I'm over the moon. I'm
Yeah.
so excited. Yeah, they're going to be playing their first preseason game here in Spokane, which is wild. I already see Kraken gear out in the streets all the time, and it's just nutty that they haven't even played a game yet, and the fan base is already growing so quickly.
Yeah, I was at the Oregon Ravens. Did you ever meet Dylan Vibes?
Yeah,
Yeah.
totally. Worked with Dylan before.
Yeah, so Dylan, I had him on my show early on in the series, but I saw on his Instagram that he was covering the Oregon Ravens, which is the women's football team, like full on tackle football team. And so we went, my girlfriend and I, we went to a game because we were just like, it's women playing tackle football, we have to go. So the announcer, I just remember it was hilarious how like the announcer was just like, Oregon Ravens just scored a touchdown. Caw-caw! And we were just the running joke her and I have had. It's like, oh, the Krakens have to have a slogan like release the Kraken or something to that level. What do you think it's gonna be when they score?
Well, sorry if you're catching a little bit of the music coming in the window, but I mean, it's a Kraken, right? It's a sea creature. You've got to have some hilarious bubbling noise coming out. Like what is it like a fish or a whale sound like underwater, right? We need to mesh some like acoustic qualities of being, beneath the ocean.
You have to. You
Take it.
have to.
I'm feeling something like resonant, really like heavy bass and kind of Christopher Nolan type sound, coming in. I
Yeah.
think that could be actually pretty unique and fun. But I mean, just being a little silly, but I think it's just going to be a blast whatever they come up with.
Yeah, I'm just I always think of like Pirates of the Caribbean and
Mhm.
the two and the three, I think, where they actually had, Davy Jones and they also had the Kraken. I'm just like, you gotta have something like maybe like boats smashing because the Kraken just ate it up. I,
There's so many really
so many
creative
things.
options that they could go with, right? It seems endless. And I think Seattle, oh man, they're such a great sports city. I think they're just going to be so much fun to go visit.
Yeah, and I'm going to my first Mariners game next weekend. So, what can you suggest for me when it comes to a Mariners game or a first time Mariners game participant?
Oh man. Well, I've spent, I don't know, a moderate amount of time. So Seattle and Spokane, first of all, two completely opposite ends of the state.
Pretty much. Yep. Yep. Yep.
And there's definitely a little bit of you know sibling rivalry type of thing going on. Folks on the east side like, very much have their strong opinions about folks on the west side, and I'm sure vice versa. But we try to play nicely. Uh,
Keyword is try.
we try. Uh, and I don't even know if I can lay claim to that yet. I don't know if I've reached full local status yet. But for going to the Mariners game, you can't go wrong. I think it's just being able to spend some time on the ocean, if either before or after the game, uh, being able to sample some of the amazing food out there. Like, I don't have anything specifically that I would recommend. I think you can find other Seattle locals who'll be able to help you out more on that. But I always drop a line whenever I'm in town. I've got a couple of friends that live over there, and just ask for what their top five are and see how many I can hit,
Yeah.
during the trip. Because the amazing food is just that's always the key, I think.
Yeah, the girlfriend, she loves Mariners games. So she said the first thing, or I guess one thing we have to do is have one of their hot dogs. And I'm just like,
Mm,
now now when we're kids, eating hot dog was like innocent fun. Now eating hot dogs as we're adults, we're like, what's
Schools
really? Yeah, yeah. It'll still be fine. It'll still be great.
I don't think so. I would go for a stadium hot dog right now. I think I'm just excited to have events back, right? Like have people being able to get together. Knock on wood. I know we've got a lot of healthcare issues to talk about as a nation, so and I don't want to dive into all that right now with you. I know that's kind of a heavy topic.
But how did you handle everything that happened in 2020? Because obviously, other than COVID, you saw that your former state of Oregon had some unwanted attention. How did you deal with all that? Keoni Chats is probably sponsored by Cove Hard Yerba Mate. Josh McAleer is a good friend and former guest of the show. And after his episode where he talked about the origins of Cove, I was curious as to what does yerba mate taste like? Just because I've seen that yellow can that says yerba mate on it. So went to the grocery store, tried it out, got that baseline understanding. And a little bit after the episode, Josh was very kind and sent me a box of all 4 of his flavors that included a berry, a lemonade, a mango colada, and a mojito. So I'm a big citrus fan. So I really enjoyed all 4 flavors at just different stages because it just didn't really, I wanted to just marinate it. I didn't want to like chug them all at once. So yeah, you really can't go wrong with whichever one you start out with in your hard yerba mate journey. So if you would like to try some of Josh's hard yerba mate, you go to hardyerba.mate.com, hardyerba.mate.com, and search around, look around, create a cart, buy a little bit of this flavor, buy a little bit of that flavor, throw in a hat, throw in a shirt, and then use the discount code Keoni Chats Kove, KEONICHATSKOVE, for 25% off your total purchase. That is huge. Thank you, Josh, and the folks at Kove for giving the fans of the Keoni Chats podcast this little this great reason to try your stuff and not hurt the wallet too much. So I know incentives is kind of a funny word to use, but discount code shows up. Of course, I'll give it a shot. Why not? You can't twist my arm too much. But yeah, it really is. It's getting colder out at the time of this recording, but you really can't go wrong. Like after work, just crack yourself a mojito flavored hard yerba mate. Try it out, get a little loose, but also feeling light because I know at least for myself, I can think about I want some beer just because it sounds really good, but it's also very heavy. But it's wintertime. I'm gonna wear sweaters, but it's also like you still want to feel light, right? Right. So you must be 21 years and over to purchase any alcohol from Kove. But if you would like to use that same discount code for any apparel, by all means. And everyone, please enjoy responsibly.
I think that's a really tough question. I guess I think about my response kind of in 2 parts, like the personal place of how, things were during the pandemic for me emotionally and hesitations about career and, things like that. And then the more societal question of, how I feel about how the nation's doing, about our response, and about, Portland specifically went through so much just emotional trauma, I guess is a good way to say it, during that time. And it's still really weird going back. And, I feel kind of somewhat guilty not having been able to be, I don't know, a participant or be with, the folks in my community through those times. We had the George Floyd protests. I think the economic impact of COVID has been really, to me, very clear and palpable in Portland, especially. And then, yeah, just all the national news media attention that's been pretty critical of Portland's leadership. And I guess that's the one that I think about talking about first, just because it feels more important than I guess my emotional state during,
that really kind of depends, because it's just what you feel you want to attack. But just go over first, because you are important, because you're here, you're in one piece. So, but yeah, I'll let you continue on.
No. I appreciate you saying so. I guess I just think when I go back and when I visit, and I try to get back very regularly, it's so clear to me how different things were than even a year ago. And I'm sure other folks feel the same way, but I think it's unique for me because I didn't get to see the slow changes that kind of accrue bit by bit. I'm just seeing these like flashes in time, I definitely notice, when I get back going through old neighborhoods, and I can tell which businesses have closed down. You can see how much more the city's been hit economically because the homeless situation, and I can only assume all the problems that also accompanies. And I guess I don't know how to go with it, because half of me wants to think about solutions, and we always preach solutions journalism, as being a really effective tool, as folks that were in the SOJC, but it's so difficult to find what the right path forward is. And I think that a lot of the trouble right now is that I think a lot of Portland's really united in recognizing that there are very fundamental issues going on right now that we can't turn away from, but we're so divided and so emotionally divided on what the path forward is. And it's just coming up in really sad and difficult ways, just discussions that I wish we could be working together on, as opposed to creating these confrontational moments. And I'm kind of dancing around the subject. I'm not really giving you a real answer, except that it's hard to see it. And as someone who's not necessarily currently located in the city, I don't feel like that I know what the solution is or the path forward. And I turn to especially great journalists in the city, and I try to take a bit of a breadth of information to see if there's any consensus, and I just don't see one right now.
Yeah, and there's no real easy answer. There's no, I mean, you kind of dancing around, as you say. I mean, I would do the same thing, because honestly, I had no idea how when the hell it happened. I was just like, how do I just know it was bad. It wasn't great. I just know the Bear Centrals is like, wasn't a great time, not a great time for the whole country or Oregon or Portland, especially when we're getting attacked by then basically Voldemort. But it's yeah, it's really no way to really like have a solution yet, because I'm sure like solutions will come about with time, but just at this moment, like knowing that the state has opened up some things, it's not like completely healed, but it's like it's still a work in progress, and some strides have been taken. Like, oh, at this time of this recording, mask mandate was lifted, but still, the word strongly recommended is still floating around. So it's like wasn't so much of a solution, but just now it's kind of like a partial solution. So it's it's a time. It's a time, Gus.
Yeah,
It's just a
it's
time.
true. Yeah, and I mean, I haven't mentioned it earlier than this, but like right now I'm currently working in my staff position at Washington State, but for the health sciences campus. So the majority of my day to day is interacting with doctors, pharmacists, and nurses, or students that are studying each of those topics. And so I feel like, COVID especially, I get an almost daily, fairly wide amount of theory and critical like news about where we are as a nation, and maybe where we should be heading policy wise. And even having all that information, at my fingertips, being able to ask really the questions that I think a lot of folks would like to have answered, even being able to ask that face to face with folks, is I still feel like I don't see a lot of clarity in the future of what's going to work, because we have, I think, a fair amount of consensus in the scientific community about the path forward that would help us, on the healthcare side of things. But then to pair that with the realities of creating policy in a country that's so devastatingly divided politically, And to have any of those policies be effective when half, depending on who is voicing them, half the country may be violently opposed to their adoption.
Yeah.
Just being able to square those two realities and then add in the economic impact, which really can't be understated. I think so many of our healthcare solutions are have to be rooted in the understanding that the economic underpinnings of our society are what are going to influence them ultimately. So having those three pillars constantly swaying makes it seem like it's just oh man, I'm sounding so defeatist. See, I didn't want to.
No, man, I think because I've seen some protests, and then they're just talking. They're more protest about not just the mask, but just like they want to get back to work. So it makes sense how like that can tie into people's responses. It's just like these mom and pop shops. They need help. They need help. So I wanted to ask you about, you've done so many projects, from when you left college 2016 to now 2021. Can you summarize your kind of growth as a person after each interview? Because I know when I started this project, my interviewing technique wasn't anywhere it is today or right now. So, just the fact that like A, I'm taking notes, B, I can formulate thoughts quickly and have a, engaging conversation. That could not have been said like 2, 3 months ago. So it's very enlightening and also very encouraging to see like, oh, the more I do this podcast, the more I talk to people like yourself, I can see myself, you know, I don't know. I don't even know if I'm gonna be a broadcaster because that's what I went to school for. It's like I want to be a broadcaster. I don't even know that anymore. But it's like at least I know that I can, you know, be an engaging and, fun person to have a conversation with. How would you speak about your personal growth when it came from, coming out of the gate? Because you said that the one with the Portland Gear Marcus Harvey wasn't your best interview. What would you say about that interview versus your most latest one?
Well, I would say that as far as like the skills that are directly associated with, essentially creating like short form documentary style content, which is the vast majority of what I do, or in the past, branded content. I think there's the logistical skills that you need to be able to, create room for success, being able to visualize the plan that you need to create, and have the forethought to be able to research the right lanes to be able to, create a great conversation with someone, and to be able to give them room to shine. I think that what's different, in the past as to right now is not necessarily that I'm such a better researcher or such a better shooter than I necessarily even was even a couple of years ago. I think my eye's grown, but I think the dramatic difference is the ability that I have to, bring those skills on demand. With Marcus Harvey, that was the only, I think that was one of like 2 video projects that I had on at the time. So I could devote all of my focus to trying to execute that. And then, in the moment I stumbled on some words and I was, feeling maybe uncomfortable and a little, what's the word that we always talk about? Imposter syndrome.
Oh, yes. Yes. That's the one.
Yeah. And that's, all of those things just change with time. But what really has changed is that now I'm working on 12 concurrent projects, right now, as opposed to being able to focus on each one, and I have to be able to bring the same level of consistency and quality to all of them. Like we had a really amazing week. We had our Center for Native American Health at WSU just opened, and it's a really, I think it's a really great step in the right direction for, especially, medical education to create space for culturally centered care, Native Americans especially, and this is a very important topic. in the Northwest, especially because we have so many Native American tribes located here, and we need to be able to create better health outcomes for them. And being able to start at medical school, teaching students the ways in which they're going to be better able to work with those populations is just going to, knock on wood, hopefully make things a little better.
Yeah, and I know that I mentioned the guest I had that's in Walla Walla. There was a lot of one of her dissertations was just that rock climbing might be fun for people, but we're also stepping all over Native Americans' lands, and we're also kind of treating it as a recreation activity when this is sacred ground. So yeah, that's kind of an underlying topic that I feel like hasn't been talked about enough because I have a friend that is in working for the government to help better have representation for Native Americans, and that he does travel like a little bit into Washington, all the way south into Salem. So it spans a very very broad way. So it's awesome that they open up their center over there. I mean, as an Oregon fan, it still hurts me to say this, but it's like, good job, Washington State. This feels weird.
We're all in it together on that kind of stuff, right?
Yeah, exactly. No silly
But,
school rivalry.
right. I feel like I didn't quite round that thought back to your original question, which was how have things changed. I guess what I was getting at is that that's such a major project and that deserves so much importance and so much focus, but so do all of these other amazing the things that the university is doing, and all these different doctors and researchers and folks affiliated with the program. I've got to be able to bring the care to each of their stories that they deserve. And so I feel like now I'm able to be able to work at a pace that allows me to take on that many projects, still give them the quality that they deserve.
Yeah, I think that's also very very important. And I told you about how before I started that I'm spreading out my release schedules. It's just because I want to give Gus's episode 2 weeks of pure love and attention before I move on to the next guest. Because back then it was just like 1 week, that's it. Next one. It's like I don't know, just didn't feel right. But I'm glad that that's it's an area you saw improvement for yourself on. So also just working for the University of Oregon, was that out of college or was that just a little bit after college?
Well, so I had an internship with them senior year, working for the communications team. And then I did just a little bit of freelancing, I guess, with them post grad. But I'm trying to think because it all kind of blurs a little bit.
100. I imagine for you, 100%, it all kind
Yeah.
of merges together. But I just want to know, like, when it came to working for your school that you graduated from, because I know sometimes when you go behind the veil or behind the curtains, it can be a little daunting or a little not what you expected. What was one of those moments where you're just like, oh, that's how Oregon operates? Oh, okay.
Yeah. No, I think that's a really great topic because I think it humanizes it. I don't think that I necessarily went in maybe just quite understanding when we say the University of Oregon did this or the White House did that, what we're really saying is that there's someone who is tasked with creating this policy or effectively communicating this need to the community, and that person or team tried their best to do that. And sometimes we knock it out of the park and sometimes we don't. And sometimes it's really difficult, I think, for people to visualize that the institutional responses that they're seeing or reacting to are also really just a bunch of individuals trying their best to work within the systems that they've been provided. And I think with U of O, that was a really it was a really amazing team that I worked with that executed their jobs at an incredibly high level, and paired that with the strategic thinking to be able to assess where they could spend their time and where they could, place value in their work, and what was, what were, because all the stories that you could tell on campus, there's a million of them, are so important to tell, but being able to assess where they can create the most positive impact, is just incredibly difficult and incredibly amazing to see when it works well. And then sometimes we get comment section that tell us where we screwed up in very specific detail, and that's pretty difficult to read sometimes. But
you gotta just ignore those. You just gotta tune them out. You can't let them seep in, man.
I know. I'm 50-50. I flip between, avoiding comment sections like a plague. But on some things, I think it's good to get a different perspective than my own, and being able to hear exactly how the community is going to react is pretty important.
Yeah, I mean, luckily I don't have as big as a following as University of Oregon, where I post about your video, and then I'm gonna get like 20 different people saying like, "You did the intro wrong. He actually worked at UW." I was like, "Whoa, time out, guys, time out."
No, I hear you.
Well,
That kind of stuff is like such a great place to, like, I'm not going to say everything that I mean perfectly in this interview, but I think that this is a really good way to get those thoughts out and try to get a little better at expressing them.
yeah, definitely, and that's what I want to have give give those people opportunities, because you are behind the camera more. This is one of your rare times you're in front of the camera. How did you feel? You did.
Yeah. I feel like the pandemic has robbed me of enough social interaction that I'd give myself some grace and say that it wasn't my best, wasn't my worst. But I was pretty happy just to get a chance to chat with you.
Right, man. It's awesome. Okay. Also, so you're talking about how pandemic made you think about some things. Folks that are watching this on YouTube, he didn't have this long of a hair when I met him in college. It was. Oh, yep, that was it. Yep, his hair is currently. Yeah. Uh, when it came to one of the beard also was one that was very iconic when I remember seeing you in school. Now adding the beard with the hair, what are people saying about your new look?
Oh, funny. My dad thinks I'm a hippie. But no, I think otherwise reaction's been pretty positive. I think it's fun to change things up and see a little bit of. I don't know. I like having my look evolve over time, and I can kind of point to certain parts of my life and know, oh, that was the look that I was rocking during that little stage in my life. And I think it visually helps you kind of remember moments and history in a way, and the way that you were feeling during that time. So I'm now going to associate the long hair with a devastating pandemic, which is terrible, but hopefully there's a second chapter to that that's a little more positive.
I mean, if you really truly wanted, there is a guy that came out of Pullman that has rocked the mullet. He has rocked a mustache. He has rocked numerous things. Obviously, talking about Gardner Minshew, current backup quarterback for Jacksonville. Who knows where he is by the time your episode airs? But could you follow in his footsteps? Could you do? I believe you said you wanted to do something like that, but the mustache also. Is that something you could do?
It's very iconic mustache. Man, I mean, he's an all-star out here, right? We're in Coug country. They love him. So I certainly couldn't try to follow him up too perfectly, but I could take a little spin on it. I think you might see the beard come off someday in the future. I think the next trip is definitely the mullet. And beard. I'd be pretty excited about that. I think that'd be a lot of fun.
I did a mustache first time. First time I did a mustache was probably 2019ish, just as like a fun joke, or maybe it was for Movember. And then the president of the company I was working for at the time, he is an alumni of Washington State. So he saw
Mm,
me, immediately said, "Oh, so you're a Gardner Minshew fan?" I was like, "No,
mm,
no, no, oh there."
that's
But
funny.
yeah, it's one of those things where like, how long do you think you could rock the mullet? What's your timetable looking?
Oh man, I'll try my best to ride that fine line of still being able to be taken seriously professionally in a space. I work on, the fifth floor of our building there on campus, and so it's all, essentially like executive level folks that, I'm already the wildest one on that floor as far as, maybe
The hair and
not
the beard.
yeah, not your classic office look. So if I go with the mullet, I'm gonna say it's a week to 2 weeks before somebody has to ask whether that how long that's going to be sticking around. I don't know.
Well, I hope to see you with that mullet at least a month from now. So,
Fingers crossed.
so Gus, I love to end my interviews by asking a couple hypothetical questions from this packet of 170. So, just take as much time as you need to think about it, or if it's a quick response, all perfect with me. So,
Okay.
my first one for you: if you were the king of an ancient civilization, what would you want your tomb to look like?
Oh, you know, my tomb would have to. Yeah, I gotta go with something original, right? I gotta go with something. First of all, I don't want to be in there. I
Oh, of
think
course not.
I want that to be the big reveal. It's got to
Yeah.
be some kind of like you pull off the lid of whatever this tomb is, and it's actually a big national treasure level surprise inside. I want there to be mystery. I If you're gonna go to the trouble of having a tomb, it's gotta have a big reveal. We
Yeah.
need some Indiana Jones going on, national treasure. I want puzzles. That's what I'm looking for. And then in the end, I'm not even there.
It's like, oh, if anything, it's just a solar powered TV screen with your reel or just who's on top over and over and over again.
So that I never truly cease to exist because my stories are still being told.
Exactly. There's the message you're trying to send.
Oh, that's beautiful. I think that's pretty funny.
I mean, I was going the whole different route. I was thinking like, oh, let's put like, oh, some football stuff. Let's put some, remember, make it a man cave. But then your answer just kind of threw me for a loop. I was like, oh, what if I had a man cave and then you step on a rock and then next thing you know, you're like in the middle of a football stadium. I don't know, man.
Ooh, I
Just some
like
sort of like transportation magically.
yeah. No, I
Uh,
can definitely see it. I don't know what the aesthetic would be. I think that's too tough for me to imagine. I'm definitely going to change it by the time I pass away. My aesthetic sensibilities definitely evolve with time. So we'll see.
we'll see. We will see. So the second question is that since you have been behind the camera operator, and cinematographer in some projects, what kind of movie or TV show would you make if money/skill wasn't an object?
Oh man, that's a really tough question.
That's why this world of hypotheticals is fun.
Yeah, I think I'll go with my gut reaction. Is I as much as I think professionally, I tend towards documentary. If I were just to say something that would really be an amazing experience for me and a lot of fun, I would love to do something that was genre bending um, within kind of a world that has some kind of magical realism elements to it. I love stories where it's you kind of pair the everyday, maybe an everyday narrative, but with the novelty of say mythology or you know there's some supernatural stories involved on top of it. I love that little melding
Mhm.
that can happen there, and there's I think a really unique space that you can reach where you tell deeply universal stories that are very beautiful, and then you can add on an element of beauty and amazing cinematography that often I think happens when you get that a little bit of that magic sprinkled in on top.
There you go. There you go. Money can sort of buy magic, but in this hypothetical world, it don't matter. It don't matter.
Just enough money to make those effects believable.
Exactly.
Marvel action.
Exactly. I mean, I would just tell the story of how you grew out that hair.
And what a tale it was.
Oh, what a tale! What a tale! Sit around a campfire, have old man Gus just start talking about it. Back in 2021,
I've developed a great accent by this time.
a random like old man, kind of was it silver prospector
Oh,
accent?
yeah, prospector. I like that. I could see doing a little prospecting in my life at some point.
Gus, where can the people find you on social media, and where can they find some of your work?
Yeah, I mean, you can find my reel at gusmctigue.com. Right now, I'm being a classic creative slacker, and I just haven't been updating it as much recently. So a lot of my content's just on WSU, College of Medicine, College of Pharmacy, College of Nursing. But I've got a little fire under me to be able to update things, so I'll make sure to post some of the latest work that I've done. But yeah, a lot of it's still in the pipe. Some of these things take so long to create. I'm happy that Who's on Top came out. I'm really happy Sophie Jones, indie film that I worked on a couple of years back, just got released as well, and you can find both of those on a variety of streaming services, and I'll be putting those on my website as well.
There you go. I know. So I saw the trailer for Who's on Top. I was slightly hoping to see like maybe an ankle, or like maybe your leg, or maybe like an arm that belonged to a cameraman, and be like, "Yeah, it's Gus. There he is." But it was too good. Your crew was too.
No, thank you. I'm in one shot.
Oh,
Climbing up Heaven's Gate right before the peak, and you can only be looking up or down. So I managed to be halfway up the chute when one of our other camera operators caught a really amazing shot with me in it. Samuel, yeah, he was a heck of a guy to work with. He was a real climber. I just dabbled.
Just a little dabbler. My friend, you officially have a podcast episode under your belt as far as release date. I mean, it's gonna be a little bit down the road, but how are you feeling about this?
This was fun. I'm glad we got to talk, and got a little practice.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, when you're in Portland again, let me know. I'd love to grab a beer with you or just hang out and talk again.
That'd be excellent.
Thank you so much for sticking around until the end of the episode. If you like what you heard or watch and would like more episodes from Keoni Chats, the show can be found on all podcast platforms and YouTube under Keoni Chats. If you want to keep in the loop on other creative content releases, you can follow KC Media on Instagram and Twitter under KC Media 13. And then on Facebook, it'll be under Conlu K Media. So if you'd like to be a guest, email me at kcmedia13@yahoo.com. Tell me your story. I'd love to get you on the show. So until the next episode, everyone, please take care.